We're here with Jen DeBell, Executive Director of the PA Association for the Education of Young Children. A new legislative session will be starting in Harrisburg in January. What would you like to see the legislature accomplish in regards to childcare?
So we would love to see the General Assembly support a proposal that the Start Strong PA campaign has put forward. It would cost $284 million to help programs recruit and retain their staff. We know that childcare programs are having a tough time keeping classrooms open because they don't have enough teachers, and that's impacting parents' ability to have access to childcare. So we want to get them some money in hand so that they can keep their staff with higher wages, benefits, retention bonuses, and then recruit new staff as well.
What kind of support does child care centers have in the state legislature currently?
So actually there's quite a bit, and we're building momentum. There's strong bipartisan, bicameral support. There were several legislators over the last year who actually stood up in our state capitol on the steps and supported this initiative. We have an early childhood education caucus that's both bicameral, bipartisan, 4 co-chairs representing the 4 different caucuses, and those co-chairs have been very supportive of the initiative, along with a variety of other members throughout the other caucuses.
For those who may not be familiar, can you describe the work of your organization?
Sure. So the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children is a membership organization of early childhood professionals across the state, your pre-K and child care directors, teachers, professors, students, so supporters of early education. And then we're part of a broader organization of nonprofits called Start Strong Pennsylvania, which is a child care advocacy campaign.
What is the state of child care in Pennsylvania like currently?
Unfortunately, it's pretty dire. Things have not gotten better post-pandemic. We actually, through the Start Strong PA campaign, did a survey of childcare providers this past September. And what we found was that of those responding, it was a little over 1,000 programs. They had 3,000 open positions, and if those positions were filled, they could serve over 25,000 more children. That's just 17% of those licensed programs that responded. So if you think about that extrapolated across the entire state, we have a major issue. We need to get more staff in programs so that parents have access to childcare.
Is this only happening in Pennsylvania, or is this a nationwide issue?
Childcare access is a nationwide issue. There are a lot of other states, though, that actually have taken the initiative to invest in recruitment and retention, higher wages for childcare staff, because they recognize that's the way they're going to get more people to come into the field and stay into the field. So we've actually looked at other states and what they've done and modeled our own proposal off of that.
What are the consequences for parents who cannot find adequate childcare?
Well, it actually sidelines a lot of parents from the workforce. There's a lot of reports that show the economic impact of that even more broadly. So if you can't find childcare, maybe you're lucky enough that you have a family member or a neighbor you trust, but you're either piecing together care or choosing to stay home if you don't have access. And for a lot of families, those are really difficult decisions to make. And ultimately, we see the impact, like I said, on employers and the broader economy when people aren't able to work.
During COVID, the American Rescue Plan gave child care centers extra funding in its aftermath. What is the impact of this funding? The
funding was really helpful. At the time, it really helped to stabilize programs, and some of the money was actually earmarked for recruiting and retaining staff, and that's what went away. So that's what we're trying to replace in a way that is ongoing, it's sustainable to make sure programs can keep their staff. Some of the other funding streams, the state government did add state funding in to ensure initiatives can continue. For subsidized families, they lowered their co-payments that they pay. For child care programs, they received a higher rate to provide care to subsidized children. And those things, credit to the governor and General Assembly, we've been able to continue with state dollars now that the funds have gone away. But as I said, unfortunately, that money earmarked for the stabilization around the staff, that's all gone.
And why is it that these child care centers are struggling to find staff?
The wages are incredibly low. The average wage in a child care program is $15.15 an hour for a teacher. So when you think about it, a lot of these, predominantly women, have bachelor's degrees in some cases. They can go and work at a fast food chain, a retail store for a lot more money. You know, a lot of other industries raised wages during the pandemic. We know there's shortages in other areas. This is one that hasn't been able to do that because of the constraints and how the funding works. So the poor wages, there's very few benefits traditionally offered in the childcare space as well. So at the end of the day, families have to be able to put food on their table for their own kids.
With Donald Trump taking office in January again, what will happen to the American Rescue Plan funding?
So as far as I know, that funding has dried up, at least what's come to the state level. We do know in the past Trump administration, there were bipartisan moves to increase child care funding, as well as other early learning line items. So we are hopeful. He has talked, on the campaign trail, the child care is generally an important issue. I believe he mentioned perhaps he would do something with the tariff he's proposed around child care, but we don't have a whole lot else. We can only go by what he said to date. But hopeful it's something that a bipartisan group of congressional members will continue to support as well.
And with the less numbers of staff members, that means that these places cannot remain open. What happens to the current places that are open when other ones close? Does their fees go up for letting your child in?
There's a variety of things that happen. We have seen closures. Net loss since the pandemic is over 600 programs. It kind of depends on the area you're talking about. Some programs are able to potentially take in more families, but it depends if they're fully staffed. We do see that some programs are forced to have to raise the rate for private pay families because that's the only way they can retain their staff to be able to pay them more. The state subsidy does not actually pay for the full cost of care. So on one hand, you have the subsidized side not paying, what it costs, and then on the other side, parents already, the cost of childcare is pretty expensive, so it's tough for parents to already afford it. So you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place as a childcare director about what to do.
Jen DeBell, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children, thank you for your time.
Thank you.